by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we sell.
Wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Saturday, 29th of June. Let's look through the market here. Daily levels. We will go first to Bitcoin. And so it's been a steady decline all the way down. Pretty steady sell-off right down to range low with a capitulation at the end. Since then, the bounce has been not, I wouldn't, it's not been great. Although it's in line with what a lot of times happens with these liquidations, is that you have several days, sometimes even weeks, of chop near those lows. I mentioned this the other day, when it failed to go above, that it would come down to this flat bottomed Tuesday candle. We did that, we took that out, now we're back inside. But there's nothing yet that would indicate that this is bottoming. This really does seem like continuation is most likely. Right, we have your sell-off, your collapse candle, and just a compression, a consolidation inside of that previous one. So the impulse move leading most likely to continuation. I mean, around that 58k level is where Bitcoin needs to hold at the pivot, which I actually already had marked. We are below the old point of control and below the value area low. We're well below June's monthly open, so we're going to have a red June. And that's another one as well to take a look at when you zoom out a bit. Right, that's not bullish. So when Bitcoin came up and had its, I think it was 8 months in a row. September, October, November, December, January, February, March. 7 months in a row. Green. Then a red April. Then a nice reversal, sweep and reversal in May. The expectation was that that would show continuation. It didn't. It must be noted that Bitcoin has been significantly underperforming stocks recently, but also there's been a lot of good news, right? People are kind of focusing on whatever bits of bad news there is, but there's been lots and lots and lots of good news, from Trump pro crypto to winning against the SEC in terms of ETH ETF getting progressed and approved. More people coming out talking about Bitcoin in positive sense. Much less, there's far more acceptance of it. And throughout all of that, price has sold off. And if you look at, let's say the monthly charts of BTC compared to the NASDAQ, you'll see a different story here. So since that March candle, the NASDAQ had its one red month, like Bitcoin. It had its nice reversal the following month, like Bitcoin. And exactly what you'd expect to see from that, when you have that one candle pullback, right? When you have a strong rally up, a single candle pullback, a reversal, or an engulfing next candle, you see immediate continuation. Bitcoin didn't. So it's worth noting. And I think that for me, it's as simple as on the lower time frames. So we're talking about in this instance, lower time frames like daily. I think that there's too much positioning built up here for Bitcoin to go higher, and it probably has to go lower first. That's the assumption I would have based off of what I see here. And I think that the market needs it to an extent. How's the S&P looking? Because Because I was looking this week at the potential for a pullback in the stock market, but it continues to hold up and frustrate bears. I do think it's going to pull back. I do think that's healthy. I do think that's normal. It's part of a typical election cycle. And when you're getting into June, July, August, September of the election year, you tend to see some chop. So if Bitcoin is underperformed while the stocks have been going higher, what happens if stocks start going lower? Is Bitcoin going to suddenly outperform? And checking in quickly on ETFs. Yeah, 73 million. Bit of inflow into IBIT. Picked up a bit for sure. But still, overall, the ETF flows. So this is something worth looking at, because you can tell from the price action. So these few days where we had really high inflows briefly were not directional, and they were not long term, because this was coming whenever the basis was high and the funding rates were high. So you could basically, what hedge funds do is they can buy the ETF, they can short the futures, and they can capture the spread in between. So we know that both from the fact that all of this pressure, this buy pressure, did not push price higher, it was right at the top, and with the fact that it all got unwound in the 2 weeks after once the funding rate returned back to neutral. Basically, the exact amount that flowed in that week in June all flowed out through the rest of June. So if you look at that, there's no strong net flows going into Bitcoin here. There's none this week. When I say strong, I'm talking consecutive multiple 100 million plus days, which that was the norm all the way through April and February and March. And so really it's since May that we haven't seen it. So this period here where, even from early May, right, big outflows on day 1 of May, but then we started to see 300 million, 200 million. Then we started to see consistent 100, 300, 200, 200, 200, 3, 1, 100, 200. Like that 2 week period, or for 3 weeks, first 3 weeks in May, was the last time that we saw actual, I think, directional flows of, longer term buyers. And so for all of June and the end of May, we've really not seen anything, which again is fine. But if you look at the actual total net flows, it has stalled significantly for quite a while now. If I can find that charted, I want to see a chart flows. Right. It should have now. Someone needs to have a chart with the flows in it. This has just the green and red to show. I want to show it with a line because you can see, at least from my tracking of it, it's been stalled around that kind of 14 to 15 billion, total inflows for quite a while now. Crypto Quant will probably have it. Probably this one shows it quite well. So looking at let's do it with all of them, including GBTC. So the first peak came in mid-March, right near the top. Then it's flatlined since then, with Grayscale declining. Little pick back up, got into the start of June. And since then, we're actually steadily declining, right? So the ETFs themselves have tailed off. Really, since the start of June, there's been outflows. even though the overall trend is positive. And so then when you go back to the start of June, you look here we are, there's the start of June. Monthly open. Slight push up, and then drift all the way down. So we know where we're at here with BTC itself. We know that without without some supportive flows from the ETFs, Bitcoin seems to be unable to break 70 convincingly. Right, we know that much. And it seems like, with all the other stuff, the Germans selling and the US selling a bit, there's just a lot of supply, there's a lot of known sellers, and there doesn't seem to be a wave of demand yet. The good thing about Bitcoin is that wave of demand is always coming back, because that's just what it does. Bitcoin just needs to reach a price that is attractive. And so, whenever we had this breakdown on Monday, I said, wait, be patient. You have to allow a few days to develop. Anyone who listened to that, you've done well, because you've avoided 4 days of noisy, shitty chop. After those 4 days, we're still no closer to a resolution to this, because it's still holding above 60, it's still holding below 62. And when you look at that, it's really, this chop here. So when you look on the lower time frames, that breakdown going into yesterday evening was valid, in my opinion. We came back inside, that's fine. But if Bitcoin is not able to get back above this midpoint, if we're looking at over here, for all of this distribution, right? If Bitcoin's not able to get back above that POC, then this is likely all just a lower high before it goes back towards the pivot, which I think at that 58k level, which I think is the area that will probably have the most, the at least potential for demand. But if you remember a few days back, I showed this and talked about it with BTC. If I can find the chart, a couple of the charts I was showing, it's not really what you want to see if you're a bull to see this, because I don't know which chart it was. Too many different charts. Anyway, I had drawn out a bunch of them, and the key thing was when you have these immediate bounces significantly lower than where we just came from, and price unable to build back anything up, this is more typical of the type of price action that leads us to actually going lower, right? The bounces get sold into. It's been 4 days now. We had the options expiry pass come and go. It was not able to push back up above it. And, if we put on the 4-hour bands, they're still fully red. They've rejected. Price squeezed on the bands for several candles, which is very typical of a bottom forming, but it didn't. Right, we didn't manage to flip those bands back to green. Impulse down, we're now down below them. So I think Bitcoin, outside of some kind of, new catalyst, is probably going lower. But with that being said, you also do get these, I've seen these in the past, where it then has a really strong squeeze up because everyone's thinking, it's below the bands, it's bearish, blah, blah, and then it pushes up, and that's the trap that gets people. And then it goes from there down below. So I'm watching for a very strong squeeze into that area where there's liquidity, for that to fail and reject if it's going lower. Or it might just roll over and fall off a cliff. But it depends. I mean, in a quiet summer period where there's not a lot of volatility or activity, you don't tend to see that. It's already had that. We've already had that kind of, every sell-off has been weak and low impulse, no bounces, and basically if you're just shorting anywhere here, you're getting away with it. So I think this next part will get choppier if it is going lower, unless there's a real mismatch and Bitcoin should be in the low 50s, and you're just going to see a one directional impulse, right? Because when price grinds into these levels, you have to look at it inversed can be a good way to view it too. If you see price moving like this, and it's moving into a key level, and you look at how does price behave before a major breakout, and you're looking at, like, you know, one of these big breakouts that Bitcoin had, say back in October, right? That's the kind of path it follows before those kind of moves. Right, probably easier if I put this one on the daily and you can see it. So when price just moves in one direction and then impulses and continues and consolidates, it's like it's actually just not finished yet. So the market needs to shift that. I'm obviously not saying that Bitcoin's going to do this, right? It's not just going to keep grinding all the way to fucking zero. But it certainly would not indicate much strength or odds of a reversal just yet. Every time Bitcoin comes into a level, it bounces weak, and then the selling continues, and it just keeps moving in the direction of down. Like, it goes down, it bounces, it goes down again, it bounces, it goes down again, I mean, it's just a bearish market. It's a sell-off. So I wouldn't try to second guess that until something shifts. And maybe that is, at least for me, the most probable is, if this is going to hold, because you get a nice deep wick, it's just that price spends a while here and is unable to break lower, and then that's when you see it move up, right? Time is what will fix these. You know, a lot of times people are like, oh, it has to, like, what have I done here? It has to, like, V reverse right away, and, you know, oh, that's it, it's bullish, let's go. But really, quite often, after a big sell-off, it's just time. And I've shown these sell-offs a million times, but after a big sell-off, if it just doesn't go down for long enough, right, it's eventually going to go up. Simple as. Same as the post-FTX. Sells off, just doesn't go down. Doesn't look bullish either, but it just doesn't go down. And we're probably 3 or 4 weeks away, if that's going to be the case, in some form or another. And, you know, same as before, patience is required. ETH, I think ETH's going to fill in the rest of this value area. I look at that rally, that sweep the lows, sure, bounced up, yeah, but that, to me, unless it gets above that POC, I think ETH's going to go right back down to where it started. And that's probably one of the areas where you're looking at we could bottom, I think, once that retraces. Solana, another example too. So Solana moved all the way down to its range low. Then you had the applications for Solana ETFs. And Solana, I mentioned this the other day, where it's going to retrace the entire move. It did that mostly so far. The question now is Solana bullish here? Or was that a push that pushed it too high because it was off news, which I think, and it's actually going to drift a bit lower from here? I think probably the latter, especially if Bitcoin is going to go lower, or Ethereum. But weekends tend to move like this, where, you know, when you have your bearish week, your weekend gets a little bit of green. That's been happening, you know, almost every weekend so far. If you're looking at these like weekend sessions, right? Green, green. The only green candles are coming on the weekend, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. So I wouldn't rely on that either, though, because once people start saying, oh, weekends we rally, but every single weekend rally's been bearish, right? It's led to new lows. So I think this is just a function of it pumped up too fast based on news that's not even, like, in any way bullish for Solana's price in the short term. Yeah, like someone applying for a Solana ETF that might get approved next year, 2025, maybe, if the SEC rules change. There's a lot of ifs. That doesn't mean Solana should be 10% higher and stay there. So it's retraced that. Question now is, is this kind of your fair value for Sol or not? I think in the near term, yes. In the mid term, I don't think so. I think this one is going to fool people into thinking, oh, it's the old 3 touches, support is holding, this is bullish. Doesn't look like it to me. After the run we had, and then it breaking down and holding and massively failing a rally, so a clean lower high, and it's now like you can just see the nature of the price action where it's rolling over. And to me, this looks like just another lower high could form, and it's just a market going like that, which is not bullish, because those are the type of moves that actually break. So I don't know. It depends on BTC, of course, but like you look at this and you think if Bitcoin goes into the 50s, Solana's probably going to go to new lows towards that 100 level. And then you look at it and think, well, there isn't really a great place for Solana to get long or to buy it. So I think something, either time needs to pass and then it needs to start building up, right? If it starts to move like that, it's okay, well, that's been long enough and it's tried again and it's building back up and it's above the midpoint of all this upper end range, right, back above that POC, and it's holding up here. Like if Solana's sitting somewhere like this, consolidating in a few weeks, I think that's a pretty good setup. Otherwise, you're just in this slow summer drift, and I think that's one that you want to be watching out for. So that's it. GM challenge coming today. Don't miss the challenge if you've not been here to see one. Challenges are where I tell you, some type of backtesting, go and research some data, find me specific projects or tokenomics, whatever. It's some challenge to do with trading that will make you better. And this challenge is different because the first person to respond with a correct answer will be the winner. So it's all about speed. So be there. I'm going to tag you later between 12 and 2 UTC with the challenge. Have your notifications on. GM.